Joining me now to dig more into the legal perspective of all of this, criminal defense attorney and legal analyst, Janet Johnson. Janet, so great to see you. Before we talk about official versus private, just talk about, are you surprised by today's ruling? Is this a win for Donald Trump?
I mean, it goes so far beyond Donald Trump. I am shocked that a Supreme Court would rule that any president, any individual has essentially blanket immunity from criminal prosecution. I know we're talking about official versus unofficial, and we can get into that later, but for 250 years, we have been told that the president is no different and is not above the law than any other citizen. And the Supreme Court today just said, forget about that. They didn't base it on anything in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution does not grant that kind of power to the president. And they said, no, we don't agree with that. If it's an official act, he is absolutely immune from even something that would be considered a crime. If it is an unofficial act, he is not immune, but we are A, not saying what's official and what's unofficial, and B, anything he says to someone else like the vice president during the commission of that unofficial act crime is not admissible in a trial for that unofficial act crime. So essentially a president, not just Donald Trump, but any president can get away with almost any crime going forward, even if it's something that would be a crime and they do it while they're president, essentially.
And do we have a good idea of what constitutes an official act? We know the Supreme Court kicking that back down to the lower court. Should the Supreme Court have made that clear?
They shouldn't have taken this case to begin with. I mean, it's not a question that they needed to answer. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that a president is immune from prosecution from criminal acts. So they really had no reason to meddle in this to begin with. But when they sent it back and then they said, we'll take it back if someone appeals that determination. But they basically said, even, sort of on having the military assassinate your rival, if you do that while you're president, that's an official act. I mean, it's stunning the power that not just Donald Trump, but any president going forward is going to have it. I think Justice Brown said it best. It's a 5-alarm fire for self-governance.
So what do you think this means for the case against the former president? I mean, we know now that it likely will not be litigated before November, but how long do you think this could play out in the courts?
Well, all of his cases. I mean, it even will affect the New York case because there were evidence was received in that case that came from people who worked in the administration. I think that essentially today's ruling says that couldn't even be used in a criminal prosecution. So that is going to be probably disturbed on appeal. This case, well, I mean, if Donald Trump wins, this case will never come before any jury because he has now been given carte blanche if he wins to pardon himself, something that would have been considered inconceivable. That is something that could have been reviewed in the past, but because of this ruling, no court can question even a pardon, even of himself, even of a crime.
Could the Supreme Court have moved faster in this case, Janet? I mean, we have been waiting for months at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jack Smith actually asked them last year to take this up because his entire prosecution essentially rests on this decision. And at that time, the Supreme Court said, no, we're not considering this, and then added it to the docket late in this process. So not only could they have taken it up, they were asked to take it up, they declined. And then when the lower court said there is no such thing as presidential immunity, they took it up and they have now reversed that holding.
And just talk about, I mean, let's say worst case scenario here, Janet, because you say that you were shocked by today's ruling. What could happen down the line, potentially, with a sitting president when it comes now to having presidential immunity?
Right. When you talk about a Pandora's box, I mean, this is truly a Pandora's box. We look at countries like Russia where they have these extrajudicial murders. People are suspected of crimes. Instead of going through the criminal justice system, we have a Department of Justice that's independent. That's been gutted today. So a president could order the military to act in a way that is criminal, in fact. And if it's a presidential order during his presidency, he is immune from prosecution. So if you start to think about what that could mean, not just Donald Trump, but any president going forward, Richard Nixon would certainly have never been investigated for Watergate had this ruling been in place in the 70s. But going forward, somebody could order his rival murdered if he's the incumbent president. And this Supreme Court has left the door open to, we are not saying that that would be illegal, because that was actually one of the things that came up during the oral argument. And the argument for Trump's case was, yeah, we think that would be legal. That has been affirmed today by the Supreme Court.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.